All right, welcome to Lucky 13, episode for St. Patrick's, the Rabbi and the Shrink. Welcome, Rabbi.
Thank you, Doctor. Good to be with you again.
We have one of my favorite speakers in the world and an expert in customer service. His name is Shep Hyken. Welcome, Shep.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
How could we avoid having you? You're amazing. I met Shep. He's one of the first people I met in NSA. And we were in a hallway sitting down. I think it was in Canada. I think it was in Vancouver. And it was the first time that we met more officially. And I remember thinking, here's this great guy, doesn't know who I am, and he's saying hello, and he's being so gracious. And then when I realized, that he is the customer service guy, because it took me a beat to figure out who you were. Then I thought, oh my goodness, that's Shep Hyken, CSP, CPAE. He's all over the place as an expert in customer service, the Chief Amazement Officer of Shepherd Productions, New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author. More importantly for me, he's one of the guys that walks the walk and talks the talk. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you.
On talking about the ethics of customer service. All right. So what does ethics have to do with customer service, Shep?
Well, that's what I thought you were going to tell me.
Well, Rabbi, why don't you tell us?
No.
I always have you do that.
Now, I can chime in an opinion on that, but I'd like to, I think there's a reason that it's important. I think anytime you are sharing an answer, giving suggestions, supporting a customer. And let's talk about customer service for this in this moment, for the way we take care of a customer when they have a problem or a complaint. And I believe the ethics of it all is no excuses. We aren't going to make something up. We aren't going to create false hopes. We're not going to tell somebody we're going to get back to you later today, and it's not till tomorrow or the next day. I mean, to me, ethics is sometimes people think of ethics as something pretty big, and it is, okay, but it's also sometimes a bunch of little small things. The promises that are either overtly stated or implied need to be kept.
Yeah, I think that's really a important insight, Shep, that it's so much of it comes down to details. When we have these big ideas, then we're sort of giving ourselves permission to overlook the little details. And if you think about customer experience, it starts a long time before the customer service call is made. It first occurred to me, and I wrote an article about it, when I had gotten a new computer monitor and I was setting it up and I followed the directions and it didn't work. And it turned out that the directions were incomplete. Now, I was able to figure it out fiddling around for 10 or 15 minutes, but, especially nowadays, we're also stressed for time. If I'm going to take your money and sell you a product, I have an ethical obligation to make it as easy as possible for you to get the most out of the product I sold you.
Right.
And if I don't, then I've failed in my responsibility as a vendor.
Yeah, and that's the point. And I just use the customer support as one example. I mean, to me, customer service is the way a customer is treated throughout an entire process when they interact with the company. And customer experience is even bigger than that. That's every interaction beyond the people-to-people interaction that you might have. And but to your point, and that's why I say sometimes the promise is implied, not overtly stated. And by implied, it's exactly that. Here's a piece of equipment that's supposed to do what it's supposed to do. If they promise it's plug and play, that's what it should be. I shouldn't have to call and spend 15 minutes on the phone trying to sort problems out. I shouldn't have to, as you say, fiddle around with it for 10 or 15 minutes, wasting my time. If it's plug and play the way they say it is, it should plug in and it should play. It should work, right? It's pretty much that simple.
And if you're going to make instructions, maybe you can help me. One of the questions I get asked in ethics a lot is, this is so obvious. How come everybody doesn't get it?
Yeah. Common sense
what I
is
don't
not always
get-
common sense.
Yeah, what I don't get is the amount of money and customer, what do they call it? The research and the focus groups, all the effort that goes into producing something, and they can't figure out how to find somebody who knows how to speak plain English to write the directions. It doesn't seem that complicated.
Yeah. So it's funny, years and years ago, and I mean, I'm talking many, many years ago, my sister, who's a genius, was hired by IBM to rewrite their manuals so that the average person could understand them, the instruction manuals to their equipment. Now, many, many years ago, the average person who would be reading that manual is still a pretty high level tech person compared to today. You walk in to a computer store and anybody can, buy a computer. But back in the 1980s and maybe even 70s, it was a complicated setup. And I think that's part of what it is. I mean, no doubt, things should work naturally. We should be able to communicate naturally. And it's just, sometimes it's frustrating. Companies haven't figured that out. And the worst part about it is, this is what drives me crazy. You mentioned focus groups. And if a customer says, let's strike that. If you go into your internal meeting and you say, what are the top complaints that we are hearing from our customers? And we have a little workshop and everybody writes them down. And then we ask, how often does it happen? And somebody says, this happens all the time. And I'm going, why does it happen all the time? Why can't they fix it so it doesn't happen anymore? Or at least fix it to a point where it mitigates it. Obviously, there's going to be misunderstandings along the way, but what can we do? When you tell me this happens every week, every day, my first question is, well, what can we do to get it to stop? What is the answer that takes place that fixes it? And why can't we put that into a more proactive situation rather than having to react every time the customer calls and we have to give them the same answer over and over again?
So Shep, in your experience, what is the main reason that we don't get it? Why is it that we don't provide good customer service? What stops us?
Oh, I don't think it's like we purposely say, I'm going to make sure we do a lousy job and make sure
I hope not.
happy with us. I just think it's not front of mind. And then again, I think that sometimes, and there's a major disconnect between executive teams and leadership and what the customer is really experiencing. I love the TV show Undercover Boss. Do you ever watch that? Yeah.
Yes, love
It's a
it.
great show. And what happens many times is the boss understands, oh my gosh, this is happening on the front line. I can't believe it. And then it's not that heads are going to roll. It's just like, we got to fix this, and it just, you have to mystery shop your own company to find out exactly. And by the way, mystery shopping doesn't mean you go out there and they know who you are. So true story. I once worked for a great organization, Morton's the Steakhouse, fancy steaks,
Love 'em.
and when I was getting ready to do their general managers meeting, which by the way, was one of the great places, it was in, the West Indies. Oh gosh, it doesn't matter. It was considered one of the top resorts in the world. That's where they were taking their managers to. Obviously, high-end steakhouse. And I remember the president of the company saying, "How often do you eat at Morton's?" I say, it's a few times a year. It's very expensive, and it's right around the corner, or it used to be right around the corner from where I live. So I would go there. But he goes, I want you to go and I want you to have the real Morton's experience, like, our high level clients do. And I go, okay, how are you going to do that? I'm going to call and make a reservation for you. I go, well, then I'm not going to have the real Morton's experience. I'm going to have the Morton's experience that the president of the company wants me to have. I want to go in there and I want to be anonymous. I want to experience what it's like as a real person to get served without them knowing that I'm supposed to be a VIP. Okay. And when that experience is the right way, that means that's what everybody experiences. And I think that's key. So where was I going with this? You asked a question. I'm giving you an answer. I'm not.
What prevents us from being from offering good customer service?
So there we go. So I think it's oftentimes the disconnect. And by the way, I went in there the first time I went there as me, and then I asked if he would give me, and I said I was happy to pay for it, and he wanted to pay for me to go to dinner. And then he said, I want you to now go back as a VIP and see what the difference was. Ironically, there wasn't much of a difference. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. Where it might have made a difference is if it was crowded and I'm a VIP and they get me in quicker. What might have made a difference is if they remembered who I was from being there before, but obviously I hadn't gone there enough that would happen. So what is the disconnect? Oftentimes, if you ask leadership how you think the services in a company, their rating is much higher than what the customer's rating is. So reality is in the customer's eyes, not the company's or the leadership's eyes.
You remind me that these food critics that are well known, particularly in New York, and the restaurants all want them to review their what they provide. And they have to have disguises, because if they come in as themselves, they know they're going to get preferential treatment, and then they won't be able to give an honest review. So they have a responsibility as critics to be creative in whatever way they can. It's one of those little ironies. I have to pretend to be someone else in order to provide an honest critique. And that's where you can get into some funny ethical anomalies, that a little bit of deception actually allows you to produce a greater truth.
But is it really deception?
Well, and that's really the question. I'm pretending not to be me in a limited.
But what we're doing is we're going in and trying to create a generic meal. Okay?
Right.
And if creating that generic meal means we have to look generic and be outside of what we normally are, I don't think that's just part of the process of getting the information that we need to have. It's not underhanded. It's just simply, I want to be treated ordinary, so I'm going to do everything I can to appear to be ordinary, and you won't recognize I'm the food critic for the New York Times.
Yeah, and that's why I say that it's what appears to be somewhat deceptive. I was thinking, you have a story I've heard you tell of getting your first job speaking in the auto industry. When
I went up to General Motors in Detroit.
Yeah.
I left out one important fact that I dropped at the end of the presentation, or at the end of my meeting, and that was that I don't live in Detroit. The guy thought that I was going to be, he didn't even know it was his assistant. I just said, look, I can be at your offices next Wednesday at 2:00. Is that convenient? And I didn't let him know that, I made it. Yeah, I guess, I'm flying in from St. Louis. Did I do anything deceptive? No, I just told them when I was going to be able to be there.
Right. And I think what makes it not deceptive is that you weren't trying to manipulate something. You were willing to take a trip to across the country to talk to somebody and to provide a service, and leaving out a detail was somehow going to help you get into this situation. But you had a product of value to offer. You weren't lying. You weren't actively deceiving. Again, we get into these gray areas where you can say in a very tight focus, there might have been something deceptive, but in the larger context, there really was nothing that crossed any ethical line. But it's having these kinds of discussions and then applying them to all the aspects of our business that keep us attuned so that we don't step over the wrong lines.
Yeah, I get it. What I did is I took a lesson from Mark McCormick's book, What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School. And he said, whenever you can offer the element of a surprise, a positive surprise. So I had been trying for the whole story is this. I'd been trying for probably a month and a half to try to get a meeting with this gentleman who is going to hopefully book me for multiple dates the following year. And as a professional speaker, that's a real important thing, is that we have dates. That's how we get paid. We have presentations. So she kept putting me off. And I finally said, look, I'm looking at my schedule. I checked the airline flights. I said, I can be in your office at 2:00 next, Wednesday, Thursday afternoon. That would be the perfect time. Would that work? Just 15, 20 minutes is all I'm asking for. And she finally relented and said, okay, maybe because I called her every other day. I wasn't afraid of the rejection. So I go into the meeting, and it was an intimidating meeting, I must say. But on the way, I took the lesson from Mark McCormick. The guy never asked where I was from. And I said, hey, by the way, I don't live here. And I know we're getting into the traffic time of day. Can you make a recommendation on how I best get back to the airport? Because I've got to catch this flight. And he goes, where do you live? And I said, St. Louis, Missouri. He goes, you flew here to St. Louis just to meet with me for 15 minutes? I said, sir, I am serious about working with you. And if that's what it's going to take is a face-to-face meeting, I'm going to fly here and I'm going to meet with you. And he goes, oh my gosh. And I'll never forget, he gets up. He doesn't even give me my answer about how to get back to the airport. He walks out and he says to somebody, and I don't know if it was assistant, he says, book this guy in Los Angeles on January 5th and 6th next year. You know, it was like 4 months away. And I'm thinking, score, I did it. That's exactly, I impressed him. I surprised him. It was a positive surprise. And I ended up working an average of about 40, almost 50 days a year for them between 1984 and 89. So about 6 years.
Wow.
Not a bad story, huh?
Yeah,
It's absolutely a great story.
Yeah, and it shows how, you don't have to resort to dirty tricks or questionable tactics. Creativity is something that is going to make you stand out.
Yep.
Without crossing any lines.
In this virtual world now, what do you notice about the differences in how we do customer service now that so many of us are virtual or hybrid or in a very diminished on-site situation?
Yeah, so that's a pretty big question with a lot of different ways we can go on that answer. For the true virtual customer services and support, it was about a year ago today, or yesterday, I think they said was the official year, when pretty much the whole world shut down.
Yes.
And everybody was sent home. And I have clients. I have this one client. I interviewed him for a special event, and he has 60,000 employees, all in a customer support center. And every single one of them had to be sent home. And they were going into places, in I would say maybe closer to third world countries where the infrastructure didn't allow for the internet and everything to be quite as strong as it was necessary for them to do what they did. But they managed to do it. Here, and maybe face to face, if you want to call it that, we go into places today and they don't allow, like I go to a bakery every Saturday, they don't take cash. They said we're protecting our customers. Everything's done with a credit card or your phone, put it over, Apple Pay, if you will. And I think that's a great choice. So customer service is changing in the way people are doing business, but the philosophy behind service has not changed.
That makes sense. I've been surprised by some of the original things people have done.
Yeah.
What have you been most impressed by with the recent transitions for how we provide it?
Sure. Well, I wrote a book about 2.5 years ago titled The Convenience Revolution, and it was all about being more convenient to your customers. And the fifth principle, there's 6 of them, but the 5th principle is delivery, taking it to the customer. Now, I was doing business with a car manufacturer, a dealership here in St. Louis for 25 years, at least. I bought, I don't know how many cars from them. I don't buy cars, I hold my cars for 6 to 9, 10 years. But, I've got a wife, I've got kids. So we bought a number of cars. And one day, my wife and I are driving around about 10 miles from here. Now, this other dealership that I've been doing business with is about a half a mile from my office. I could drop my car off, walk to work, go back and pick it up when it needed service. And it was never really a hassle, other than if they promised me a rental car and they said, hey, it's going to be a little while before their car's ready. And then it did become a hassle. Well, I'm out at this other dealership and my wife says, look at that car. Let's go check it out. So first thing I say when the salesperson comes up, I'm just looking. They hear that all the time, right? And what happened is the dealer said, why are you just looking? If you like the car, why wouldn't you buy it from me? Because you're 10 miles away and the other dealership that I could buy it from is a half a mile away. And he says, do you see a waiting room? And I said, no. He goes, we have one. It's small, but hardly anybody ever uses it. Because when you buy a car from us, we bring the car to you. Every time you need service, we will pick up your car and drop a new car off. And they drop not brand new, but it's a demonstrator. So it's maybe got 1,000, 2,000 miles on it. It's pretty new. And I get to drive this car for the day, or my wife gets to drive it. And then they pick it up. No extra charge. That's what they say is their concierge, white glove, great service, that they wanted to separate themselves from the competitors. Well, you know what happened when the pandemic hit? All of a sudden, nobody was going to car dealerships, and car dealerships got smart. They said, well, if they're not going to come to us, let's go to them. And all of a sudden you started seeing, radio or TV, and then you hear radio advertisements about how if you want to buy a car from us, go online, look at the cars that you want, fill out the form. You can check all the options, email it to us, and we'll bring you a car to test drive, and we'll bring you your car when you need service. And all of a sudden, this breakthrough became not just a trend, but an expectation. Now, it didn't matter if it was a high-end automotive dealership or, I'm not going to say low end because I don't think Toyotas are low end or Chevy, but your average dealer. It's not a Mercedes or a Lexus or a BMW, but all of these dealerships were now doing the same thing. And I think that's what's changed, is that people in business recognize we've got to be more convenient for our customers if we want our customers to be comfortable doing business with us. We also need to be health and safety conscious more so. That's why, and by the way, grocery delivery, they're doing it now. All the delivery companies that are out there, the Uber Eats, the Grubhubs, it used to be my favorite Chinese restaurant would deliver my Chinese food for free. Now there's a $3 upcharge, okay? And I'm happy to pay it. That's what's changed, is I love the convenience and I'm more willing to pay for it.
That sort of leads into it. This may sound a little philosophical, but as companies do better and better jobs, if they do, as they should, then customer expectation rises, which then requires companies to start looking for ways to raise the bar further.
And what's wrong with that?
Well, that's in principle. I mean, certainly as a customer, it sounds great.
Yeah.
Does it reach a point where customer expectations become unreasonable?
Well, in some cases, rock star companies have created those unreasonable expectations because customers no longer compare you to a direct competitor. They compare you to the best service and experience they receive from anyone. And if that is, and so I'll ask both of you, what are your favorite companies to do business with? If you only could do business with one company, what's your favorite, easiest, least amount of hassle company?
Amazon.
Same thing with you? Yeah.
I think I'm not traveling much lately, but I really like Southwest.
Okay, you like it, but those are rock star companies, aren't they?
Yeah.
The majority of people say Amazon, and Southwest. If you're asked to just say, give me a list of the top 10 companies, chances are Southwest is going to fall in, and they just do a great job. So what happens is, if you like the Southwest experience, and you do, and you go to any of the other airlines, you're going to hope that you get a similar experience from those other airlines. And you want to know something? Some of those airlines aren't equipped to do it. If you go to Amazon and you have this great online experience, and then you go to some other online company and it takes you a week to get whatever it is that you ordered, and they didn't give you the tracking information. They said, the order was confirmed and shipped, and you're wondering, is it going to get here? And then it surprises you when it's here. What does Amazon do? Amazon, you place the order, you immediately get the email, your order's placed. Then a little while later, your order has shipped. Here's the tracking information. And then when the order finally is received, you get a picture of that box sitting next to your doorstep. And so what companies can take from that is, and I'll give you an example, since we're talking about airlines also, how can the airlines create an Amazon experience? Well, what did Amazon just do in that example? They gave me information. Yonason, have you ever sat in an airport wondering whether or not your plane was going to take off or not? And so here's the example, and I'm picturing this in my mind. I'm sitting in an airport, and it's the plane's supposed to leave at 4:00. It's now 3:45, and I don't see a plane at the gate. Meaning the plane hasn't landed, come in. It still has to deplane the passengers. By the way, that's a funny word, deplane. But that's wait for everybody to deplane. I think it's really you depeople the plane. You don't deplane the plane, but that's another story. I digress. So anyway, but I know there's no way that that plane can land even in the next 2 minutes and get the passengers off and all the passengers on and leave on time. So why hasn't the person behind the ticket counter who works for the airline picked up the microphone and said to everybody in the area, hey, everyone, you might notice we don't have a plane here yet. Let me tell you where the plane is. The plane is en route. It should land here in the next 7 minutes. It takes almost 15 minutes to get people off the plane, another 10 minutes for us to clean the plane up. And by the time we board you, if we do it quickly, we'll probably be out of here. Instead of 4:00, we'll probably be out of here about 4:30, 4:35. I just wanted to let you know. Okay. That is the Amazon experience. Yes. Okay. It's giving me information. And so one of the things we talk about, and I know I'm kind of going deeper in this, and if you want me to stop, I will. There's this process we take our clients through. And the question you ask is, why should someone do business with me? And the answer to that is really what makes me stand out from my competition? What makes me better maybe or different? And so we first ask you to look at your competition, even though we don't want you to copy the competition. Although if they're doing something that you could be doing that's taking business away from you, you might want to consider doing it. But what can you do to make it your own, right? So you personalize it, you customize it, whatever, and it becomes your own version of what someone else is doing in your industry. But then you go to look at your non-competitors, anybody outside of the industry. And the question we ask is, we have a think tank of employees, leadership, stakeholders from other parts of the company. We ask them, who are your favorite companies, or what are your favorite companies that you do business with? And we list them out: Amazon, Southwest Airlines, the restaurant down the street, the shoe repair, that vendor that we use who's got an inside sales rep that's just unbelievable. Okay, so we list those companies, and then we list all the reasons why we love them. And then we say, what are they doing that we could be doing that we're not doing? And then we go back after we talk about this and we decide what we're going to change. We go back and we ask the question again. If we were to do all that now, why would a customer want to do business with us? And you see that process from beginning to end is really about comparing ourselves to really rock star companies that are setting the bar higher in everybody's industry, not just their own. And taking advantage of what we can learn from them and implement it into our own company.
What I always like to do is take what you've just described so beautifully and then expand it even beyond the boundaries of business. And if we cultivate the mindset that you're describing in our business relations, and then we expand that outside of our immediate business, then we're going to enhance our relationships in every aspect of our lives. Instead of, we all complain about politics, and we try to stay away from politics on this program, but
let's go for it. What do you think?
No, I don't even want to go for it.
I'm just kidding.
Although there is a question in the chat, if we really want to, we could follow that up. But my point here is that if I feel like I'm helpless to change the political situation, the political climate, but if I can make my workplace a better environment, and I'm motivated to do that because the one thing we all agree on is we want to make more money. And having an ethical mindset, a customer mindset, a colleague mindset in business, then that can spill over to the wider society. And then we all get to live in a better world.
Yep. It's just real simple. Do the right thing. Now, here's an example, and I'm going to read from Jenny to all participants. Ethically, should we continue to do business with companies who ban books and silence free speech? I think that's a pretty broad statement. And I don't think they silence all free speech. They just silence the speech they don't want others to hear. Okay. Or they ban books that they don't want others to read, that they disagree with. Okay. So I think this is why I think this is what makes the world go round. Is there's Democrats, there's Republicans, there's liberals, there's people who believe in this, people who believe in that, and I think we can all get along and we can all agree to disagree. That's the beautiful thing. If we can all agree to disagree. So all the things we talk about, whether they're in business or personal relationships, if we always said, is that the way, and I know the golden rule, is that the way I would want to be treated? And if I disagree with somebody's, I'm not going to say it's their ethics, their politics, and there's a difference, but some people confuse the two. They think it's unethical to do this. It's improper to do this. And maybe it's just somebody's politics and their beliefs. Maybe this is something they grew up with all their lives. We're living in a world today where, I'm not going to give away my age. Okay. I'm going to be 70 years old. Actually,
Wow.
71 years in 10 years. No, that's, I knew I'd get some reaction.
You got me.
I got her. And actually, so I'm basically 60 years old. And not that long ago, maybe a month or two ago, somebody in my office made a comment. Somebody wanted a book signed. And I said, who should I sign it to? And she said, they would like the book signed to Bob. And I said, okay, Bob, and who else? And and she looked at me like I was crazy. I said, didn't you just say they want the book signed? Well, there's another person involved. No, that's the way Bob likes to identify, is a they, not a he or it or whatever. And I go, okay. So I'm sorry. And by the way, there was a little bit of a confrontation through all this, because it's like I kept saying, who else? And she was playing with me, and she knew she was playing with me. So for 60 years, or however long from the time I learned pronouns, they, to me, stands for plural. Okay. Now, in writing today, you're allowed to use the word they to describe, so you don't have to constantly say he or she. You can say the customer came through the door and they did this. But when you're talking to somebody and you say, hey, they want to get the book signed. Okay, who do I sign this to? And Bob, and who else? Don't play with me. Just say, it's just Bob. Bob identifies the they. Oh, okay, that's cool. And we do it. But you got to explain it to me. I love the dog walking.
That's my super dog. That's my ethics czar.
So the point I'm trying to make is that I'm totally on board with, if somebody wants to refer to themselves as a he, she, them, they, whatever it is, I'm totally on board with that. But for 60 years, I've been taught something else. So you're going to have to teach me to think differently. I don't disagree with it. I just have to practice it a little bit so it becomes natural. And it's hard to break a 60-year-old habit, but I'm doing it. And I think everybody needs to be that kind of, have that open-mindedness today, to be willing to see the other side, to understand the other side. Even if you don't understand it, be willing to give somebody the benefit of the doubt, especially if it's not doing you any harm, if it doesn't hurt you in any way, accept people for who they are and what they do. Yeah,
it's all about respect.
Yeah. So, hey, by the way, if you disagree with somebody, you do have a choice. There's some companies that have taken some pretty strong stances, both politically and religiously. Look at Chick-fil-A. Okay. If you disagree with Chick-fil-A and you don't want that delicious chicken sandwich, you can choose not to do business with them.
I mean, if I try to meet you halfway and you try to meet me halfway, there's a pretty good chance we're going to get there.
Yep.
But if I'm going to plant my flag because you're making a decision that I may not agree with, that isn't something that, and again, a lot of it has to do with social norms. And this is where it gets very confusing, because if social norms accept
that they is plural, not singular, right?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up like you. I studied, my degree is in English. I think it's important to use words the way they are meant to be used, but language does evolve, and things that were once incorrect become acceptable. And while I can hold myself to a higher linguistic standard, it may not be reasonable for me to impose that on everybody I communicate with.
Right. You should see me when I go to a hotel and expect to get the service I think I deserve, and I don't get it. My wife just goes off into the corner and says, "Oh, here it goes all over again." But I think that when we get back to business, if you're going to pay somebody good money to buy a product or get a service, you would expect that it would be right.
Yes.
And what is the definition of right? If you're going to put on the door or on your sign that said our customers are the most important thing we have to us, then you better treat me like that sign says.
What about when you call on a customer service call and you get somebody who's clearly from a different part of the globe, not necessarily the easiest English to understand, clearly reading from a script and not responding directly to your questions?
Mm-hmm.
And now this has become the norm in so many industries. Is it really a question that companies are trying or need to minimize their customer service expenses in order to stay competitive?
In some
or
cases,
are they just trying to squeeze more blood out of the stone because we don't really have an option?
Yeah, and so I want to pull one thing out of that equation, and that is the person who has the thick foreign accent from the other side of the world that you're struggling to hear, because I don't think that it matters whether it's on the other side of the world or right down the street. If you've got somebody reading from a script that's not showing empathy and not showing true concern for the customer, they're just going through the motions, you're going to be frustrated regardless. Sure, having a tough time understanding a person is also there. Excuse me. I was calling a support center, and I could understand the person's accent perfectly, but what made it hard for me to understand them overall was the noise I heard in the background, which was probably 200 other people in that support center, because I could overhear that conversation. I kept saying to the person, I said, "I completely understand you when I can hear you." So, but to your point, the kind of, it's real. Why do people offshore some of those jobs? Why do companies do that? Sometimes it's a financial decision. Sometimes it's, if you want to have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service, we may have to staff people in other parts of the world that when you call at 2 a.m, it's 2 p.m. for them. And so that's one reason why support centers shift calls around the world throughout the 24-hour period or throughout holidays to make sure that they're covered. Another reason support centers are around the world is, and by the way, the support centers, when this was the gentleman I talked about earlier, had 60,000 employees and 62 support centers around the world. He said the reason we had so many support centers are all the reasons I mentioned, but also if you're in the US and there's a hurricane on the East Coast, we can shift all the calls to the West Coast. Well, guess what happened in the pandemic? We had 100% shift everybody to home, so it was quite an ordeal for them. Anyway, I digress on that, but what the point I'm making is that there's a lot of legitimate reasons for doing it. Now, there is not a legitimate reason to hire somebody that is going to be difficult to understand if, from different parts of the country. Now, there are some support centers that are so good, they'll ask you what your native language is, and they will send you to a support rep who speaks that language. So there's your other extreme. Yeah.
Yeah. They're back to the creativity and then the initiative and the being proactive.
Yeah. See, I come from Cuba and my mother spoke of the English, but not also so perfect. And Miami shifted pretty early to having, would you like someone that speaks Spanish? Habla español, por favor. And they send you off to the Spanish speaking world. And it was always nice. And my mother did business with the people who would cater to that. Mm-hmm. And I became an interpreter at an early age. So that was interesting. So one quick issue then, with all this virtual stuff and people home, there's two pet peeves I have. One is with the masks, you can't understand anybody.
It's harder to hear, no doubt about that.
I don't understand what they're saying. So I don't know if at some point they're going to get a microphone closer and then you get spit sounds. I don't know. I mean, there's always that's one issue.
Well, somebody's working from home, they shouldn't need to wear a mask.
If they're working from home, but sometimes they're in a center and or in their office and it's required. So it's interesting with internal customer service. Some companies that I've been consulting with say you have to wear the mask if you're in the center, even if you're alone in your office, which makes no sense. So it makes it hard. So I have learned as a customer to say, would you mind if you're alone in the room, would you mind taking your mask off so I can hear you? And that's interesting. Just having to think about how do we do customer service, keeping our internal people safe, but at the same time, without being ridiculous for the sake of politics or an ethical charge of unsafe or whatever. I mean, you have to take a picture of you talking to show that no one's around. I don't know. And more, the people who come delivering, they wear their masks, but you know what? Their mask is here.
Yeah, that's like not a real part. So what somebody described it as this, it's like, the whole mask thing, you talk about political and some people agree with it. Some people don't agree with it. It's like, we don't, if we don't worry about masks here, but we worry about masks over there. You have to,
Yeah.
So I can't remember, but I'm going to try to say this as tactfully as possible. Okay. It's like you have a public pool and you tell people, look, if you're going to go to the bathroom when you're in the pool, just go over in that corner. It's, it just doesn't make any difference. I mean, as soon as a person decides that they're not going to wear a mask, then if they're only wearing it halfway, it might as well not wear it at all because it's not doing any good. And if masks are mandatory, then wear them the right way.
Yeah, I mean, there's the focus on. I mean, I'm dealing with this with my mother, who's 92 years old, and she's in a assisted care place, and they've been very, very strict about protecting their physical health, but at a tremendous cost to their psychological and emotional health.
So none of that was taken into consideration throughout this whole process, was it?
Yeah, and that's a very real. One of her neighbors, really tragic story. An older gentleman who had lost his wife and was isolated, and he jumped off his balcony. Now, they were taking care of his physical health, but you have to look at the whole picture, and you have to anticipate the effects of every decision, of every choice, of every policy, because if you don't, something's going to come back and bite you.
Yeah, that's just so sad. I'm a psychologist, and I've been doing a little overtime with suicidal veterans and people either in the military or their loved ones, because they're so overwhelmed right now with everything that's happening. And it can be very stressful times. It's interesting how we manage it or don't manage it. Well, on that happy note, Rabbi, you have a word of the day. Why don't we go to that?
I love the word of the day.
All right.
Yes, the word of today is one to love. It's quotidian. And quotidian means everyday, ordinary, often to the point of mundane. And I thought it was a good choice, because when it comes to customer service, it's one of those things where we want everything to run so smoothly and so predictably, and so to the point where we don't notice anything, because of course, as human beings, we don't notice when things are going well. We only notice when things are not going well. So on the one hand, I know, Shep, you talk about being amazing and moments of magic, but don't the moments of magic come out of making the ordinary just flow?
Yeah. So this is, to me, what a moment of magic. Well, let's step back. Moments of truth is where I came up with the idea of moments of magic. A moment of truth, according to Jan Carlson, former president of Scandinavian Airlines, is whenever a customer comes into contact with a company, they form an impression. It's that simple. And he said it can be good and bad. And I've just given names for them. Bad is a moment of misery. Good is a moment of magic. Now, there's also one in the middle. It's a moment of What was your word today?
Quotidian.
It's a
Quotidian.
quotidian moment. It's a quotidian moment in that it's a moment of mediocrity. So you got misery, mediocrity, or quotidian, and magic. Although now if I go with quotidian in the middle, I'm going to have to come up with Q words on each side. So anyway,
And quintessence. How about that?
the mundane, the average, the trite, the pedestrian, the quotidian, the common, the conventional, the mainstream, the unremarked. I'm reading all the words in the chat. These are great. Pedestrian, prosaic, uninteresting, uneventful. Those are, in my mind, is really close to a moment of misery, because what your experience is just like they just went through the motions. It was okay. It did what it was supposed to do, but nobody was friendly. They weren't mean either. Nobody really smiled, but they didn't frown at me either. And so that's average. What do you need to be in that moment of magic zone? What do you need to do to create amazement? So amazement is any interaction that you have that's better than average. And it could be a tiny, tiny bit better than average, or it can be a moment of misery that took place. I call you with this problem and you solve it. And I'm thinking, these people are the best. You know, they went over and above. I don't know what they did, but they did whatever it was that made me feel that way. So what we're trying to achieve in the world of customer service is a consistent and predictable above average experience. And when I say above average, it's as simple as I'm walking in a store and somebody says, an employee says, good morning, instead of just letting me walk by. They've just elevated the normal or average or nothing exceptional experience to something a little bit better than average by just saying good morning. And maybe if they recognize me, good morning, weren't you here 2 weeks ago? Yeah. Boom, they've now taken it to a whole nother level. You know, that's why the restaurant that remembers your favorite table or your favorite dish is really important. And there's all kinds of tools that allow even customer service reps. If I call you and you've never talked to me before, and you identify who I am through either asking questions, or maybe there's a voice recognition program, which is a great customer service tool. You don't have to ask me my social security number and my firstborn child's last maiden name or whatever it is that you want. You just hear my voice for about 9 or 10 words, and immediately that voice print lets the agent know, oh, this is Shep calling. Hey, Shep, so you've called here before. As a matter of fact, the last time you called, it was because of whatever. You don't even know me, but you're personalizing that experience. And now I love the company because of the process, not just the people. But back to the above average experience. We're trying to create an above average experience that's predictable. It doesn't have to be over the top. But what you want your customers to say is, I love doing business with them. They're always friendly. They're always knowledgeable. They always get back to me when they say they will. They always have the answers to my problems. Even when I know there is a problem, I know they're going to take care of me. You know, they always will. The word always followed by something positive is what you're looking for. And again, it doesn't have to be over the top. It just has to be a little better than average. When you do that all the time, you're operating in that zone of amazement. So create those moments of magic consistently and predictably, and then people will say they're amazing. They always, and you can fill in the blank.
I think that was so well said. I have a quick family story. When we first came to this country from Cuba, my father, we started over with nothing, and my father loved Sears, he loved the Pope, and he loved Ford. Okay. And so we went to Sears, and he had to get a television for his mother. And it was so crowded because it was this cheapo sale, right? Because starting over, my dad, they'd been wealthy in Cuba, but he had to get a TV for his mama. So he's walking around, no one would serve him, so he's about to leave. We figured we'd come back later. When this young man comes running after my dad, he's so close to the exit, and he goes, excuse me, sir, he taps him. Were you interested in a TV? Have I got a deal for you? And he took my dad by the arm, and he took him, and it wasn't his department. He knew nothing about TVs. And I was very young. I didn't speak English particularly well at the time, but we remember forever because he became folklore. And my father would say, no, we'll just come back another time. I have questions. He said, no, but sir, this TV is gold, and gold is a very rich color. So my dad bought it because he was trying so hard to make the sale and to be pleasing. And from then on, for us, the customer service, and the motto is, because gold is a very rich color. And I just think that's kind of funny. We'll always remember Mr. Spiro with his, suit that was too big and his sweaty self in Miami, Florida Sears.
Yeah. So I love Sears too. I love the catalog. Growing up, that was like, I would just
Yes.
go through that catalog. And but anyway, great story. And isn't that sometimes what makes the difference? You can go to a diner, just a greasy diner, hamburgers, eggs, bacon, whatever. What makes it exceptional? I love the owner. I love the server. I can get eggs and bacon anywhere. So sorry, no bacon. For the rabbi.
No judgments around.
So by the way, there's a perfect example. Bacon, no judgment. You're not going to be upset if Dr. Red Shoe orders a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich, and she's not going to be upset if you don't. Okay.
I'll tell you, at my first National Speakers Association convention, I signed up. I was expecting it to be like most of my trips, where I'm going to live on yogurt and granola for 3 days. But there was a kosher box to check when I signed up. So I checked the box, and then I called to ask them who does the supervision, and it was somebody that I could rely on. And while everybody else at the convention is standing in line to get their food from the buffet, I walk in, a server approached me, and he says to me, Shalom Aleichem, which is the classic Jewish greeting. And I said, Aleichem Shalom, which is the classic Jewish response.
Hello?
What? It means hello. It means peace upon you.
Oh, shalom.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I thought, he was a little darker skinned, and I thought maybe he was in the Middle East. And he introduces himself. My name is Rashid. I'm from Morocco. He said he knew Judaism very well because he had Jewish neighbors. He said, you come in, you look for me, you sit down, I'll take care of you. And they brought me my food. It was wrapped up, so I knew it was kosher. And people are looking at me. Who is this guy who's getting personalized service?
The VIP
who's getting
treatment.
His own menu. What did he do? How do I get what he has? And then I've got people on either side of me at breakfast eating their bacon and ham and eggs.
Well, that sounds perfect. Well, I'm mindful of the time. Shep, we're just so grateful that you joined us. You have so much to offer in the world, in customer service, ethics, everything. I mean, I think you're terrific. And anytime I can read your stuff or watch you, I do. I'm just incredibly grateful. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's fun. I just like having a good conversation about all of this. And this isn't the typical interview. This isn't like you didn't grill me on like, well, tell me about your latest book. Tell me about, all that. It was just, let's have a talk. And I like the idea of ethics. And I think really at the end of the day, people should just do what's right.
Yeah.
Right is defined by the way we're brought up. And sometimes it's not the way somebody else perceives right to be. And sometimes it is, even the way we're brought up might not be right. But overall, people do the right thing. Let me kind of close on this thought. I just had dinner with this gentleman the other night, and I'd never forget writing about his company. They spent millions of dollars to create a system that would prevent theft in their retail stores. And what they realized is they made it hard on the 99+% of the people that were honest in order to prevent this smaller than 1% group of people that was stealing from them. And the cost of this exceeded the amount that was being stolen. And at what point did finally somebody say, we're spending a lot more money than was being stolen before, and we're irritating 99% of our customers in doing so. So I think you err to good judgment. You err to the side of right. You err to the side of the customer if you can. And I always say, if it's possible to not say no, as long as there's nothing moral or legally or ethically wrong with doing so, and it's not going to hurt the company. If you're hired and you're a good person and you've been trained well and you're pretty smart, your boss, your leader, your owner, CEO should say, go out and do what we expect you to do. So,
Well, Shep, if there's anything we can ever do to be a service to you, we'd be honored. You let
well,
us know.
thank you.
We're
I
here.
appreciate that. Like the Godfather said, I don't know what that day may come. I may not, whatever the favor. One day I may ask you for that favor. That day may never come. So,
Well, we're grateful.
Whenever you ask, we're here for you.
I am too. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Shep.
Have
Thanks
a
so much
great
for joining
day
us.
and stay safe and happy St. Patty's Day.
What a day.
I know. And you were our lucky 13. So we're grateful. Thank you.
All right. I'm honored. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye, Rabbi. Thank you.